Middle Childhood, Chapter 5, Discovering Lifespan. The developing self, we will be looking at that along with relationship building in middle childhood, family life as well. We will explain this and summarize how children view themselves and changes in middle childhood, explain how this affects their self esteem, looking at Kohlberg's 6 stages of moral development and comparing those with Gilligan's sequences, as well as identifying Damon's stages of friendship and explaining the factors that determine children's popularity in middle childhood. We will also look at the impact of gender and culture on friendships, how family dynamics or the variety of family constellations and has their impact on child development in middle childhood, as well as the impact of work, divorce, and poverty. So let's get started. Eric Erickson's middle childhood encompasses the industry versus inferiority stage. Will the child learn to feel competent, incapable, or less than and inferior? Remember, autonomy versus shame and doubt with 6 months to toddler, initiative versus guilt, toddler to 6 years old, industry versus inferiority, which is resolved positively when experiences lead children to develop a sense of competence and useful skills and tasks. Children enter the school years and are industrious. Their social understanding is expanding. They're learning their strengths and weaknesses and personality traits. Their self esteem develops in important ways during middle childhood. Children begin to compare themselves to others, which is not always a good thing. Children develop their own standards as well. There's change and stability in their self esteem. Most children's self esteem increases during middle childhood. Children with lower self esteem may become enmeshed in a cycle of failure. Parents can break that cycle by promoting and self esteem using authoritative child rearing skills. African American adolescents with strong ethnic and cultural identities have higher self esteem. The continent of Asia has 48 countries and 2 territories with differing cultures. Asian children are not homogenous and come with individual identities and cultures, so we cannot group them and make blanket statements as the one that is listed here because they are not a monolith. But they tend to have similar patterns in self esteem, as does Hispanic children. Most children from what's considered a minority culture, when they have a positive ethnic identity, that also boosts their self esteem and their self acceptance. The struggles of immigrant children and families are socio-political. Some immigrant families have professions in their native countries, but not always able to reestablish careers in the United States as easily or quickly. Immigrant children that are not as well off financially are still highly motivated to succeed. They tend to fare quite well in the United States. When it comes to the moral development, Kohlberg suggests a series of stages in the development of moral reasoning, as indicated here. Pre-conventional morality, stages 1 and 2, follow rules attentive to rewards and punishments. That's the belief. With conventional morality, stages 3 and 4, people approach problems in terms of their own position as good, responsible members of society. Post-conventional morality, stages 5 and 6, the universal moral principles are invoked and considered broader than a particular society. Kohlberg proposes that people move through these stages in a fixed order. They're unable to reach the highest stage until adolescence, which because of the limits in their cognition. Not everyone is presumed to reach the highest stage. Post-conventional reasoning is relatively rare, and when we assess Kohlberg's theory, we must take a good account of moral judgment, but not adequate at predicting behavior. The theory does not generalize to non Western cultures as well. When it comes to Gilligan, she believes boys view morality as justice and fairness. Girls see morality as responsibility and compassion toward individuals and willingness to sacrifice for relationships. Again, not all research finds males and females differ in moral reasoning. Gilligan also suggests that the differences in the way boys and girls are raised in our society leads to basic differences in the way men and women view moral behavior. However, parenting style has a greater influence no matter the gender of the child. Research suggests that very little difference in moral development in males and females, with both using justice and care orientations in making moral judgments. Please make note of the information and the examples provided in Gilligan's table. Let's do a quick review. According to Erickson, middle childhood is industry versus inferiority stage. Children use social comparison and self-concepts that are more psychological than physiological in nature, and children develop internal standards for themselves and to work toward achievement. Kohlberg suggests moral development occurs in three stages that range from being concerned with rewards and punishments to a sense of universal moral principles. Gilligan proposes girls are progressive morally on responsibility towards individuals and compassion. But note, research does not support any major differences between boys and girls when it comes to morality. So checking your understanding, answer the question below. As the children develop a better self-understanding in middle childhood, they begin to view themselves less in terms of physical attributes and more in terms of their psychological traits. If you selected B, then you got that one right. According to what, people pass through a series of six stages as their sense of justice and their level of reasoning evolves with age and cognitive development. Of course, we just mentioned Kohlberg. Relationships, building friendships in middle childhood. When it comes to friendship building, research suggests forming friendships as a key component to adolescent and teen well-being. During adolescence, parents tend to have more influence than friends, though that does change with most children as they seek greater independence in late adolescence and teen years. So the development of friendship is important because it allows children to manage and control their emotions because they begin interacting with their peers, and that's going to be one of the things they have to learn to do is control their emotions when they're interacting, whether they're in conflict, whether they're working together. It also helps them to learn how to communicate with others. It fosters their intellectual growth because they're interacting again with their peers. They're using all of their cognitive skills. It allows children to practice relationship skills. It's important that children develop friendships during this time. And as noted, friends' influence does not become greater at this point than that of parents. So parents still have a degree of control when it comes to their middle childhood age children. Stage one, from about age 4 to 7 years old, children see friends as playmates. Other children that are willing to play with them nicely are seen as their friends. They are less judgmental and select friends based on the behaviors and reciprocates friendliness. For stage two, from about age 8 to 10 years old, children are learning to trust each other and they're identifying traits in personality. Trust is at the basis of friendships at this stage. Stage three, age 11 to 15, which is the end of the middle childhood friendships, They become based on how children feel about each other, emotional closeness, and psychological connectedness. We will look at states of friendship from the perspective of peer acceptance. Peer acceptance is assessed using self reports that measure social preferences by asking children how they feel about their peers, like which ones they like the most, who they like the least. Burke puts it best. Friendships become a mutually agreed on relationship in which children like each other's personal qualities and respond to one another's needs and desires. Popular children are well liked, can be pro social, admired for their academic and social competence. They're on student council, perhaps will become homecoming king or queen. Popular children can be antisocial as well, admired for being troublemakers. The bad girls, bad boys. Rejected children are disliked. They can be the aggressive type, always looking to fight, or they could be withdrawn, socially awkward, or may experience anxiety. Controversial children are both liked and disliked. The neglected children are neither liked nor disliked. They're simply not mentioned. They're the child that no one seems to notice. However, the neglected children are well adjusted and socially skilled as peers. They're often that child that sticks to themselves and is not a part of any particular group or clique. Social competence. These skills are skills that lead to success in social settings. I direct you to page 244 in your text. Social competence skills, the collection of these skills that permits individuals to perform successfully in social settings. They're helpful and cooperative, the ones who have a good sense of humor, good emotional understanding, and they adapt well to social situations. Social problem solving abilities are also important. Use of these strategies to solve conflicts in mutually satisfying ways. You'll see figure 5.10 provides an example of problem solving abilities. See your text for figure 5.10. Social competence can be taught to children. Teaching social competence is important. If you know Dodge's steps, they allow adults to intervene and build on the child's weaknesses. Several programs do exist to teach social skills as well. Making children aware that people display emotions and moods non-verbally is valuable to helping them understanding social cues as well. Conversational skills, including the importance of asking questions and self-disclosure with limits. You never ask children to choose teams or to be on in groups publicly when they're uncomfortable or they're not typically accepted. Bullying is an issue that is constant, whether it's on the schoolhouse, schoolyard, or online. It continues to be an issue for all. It is something that is, though we are more aware of it today, it continues to be a problem for all of our children. We have not found a safe resolution to bullying in any school district. Even with the 800 number, it is a constant. There are still adults who do not see the impact of bullying. Cyberbullying represents a majority of the bullying that goes on today, verbal, physical, relational as well, a variety of undesirable behaviors. There are other encounters of bullying on the internet, which can be more public and as well as anonymous. Bullying can be detrimental to a child's well being. The characteristics of bullies and their victims are increasingly understood by researchers. Greater understanding of causes and consequences leads to more effective interventions. However, it seems that most often in reality, it is the victim that people look to change or to make different or to make better or to help them be more acceptable, as opposed to looking at the outrageous behaviors of the bully and addressing that. When it comes to gender, culture, and friendships, gender and friendships, the sex segregation of middle childhood, girls do tend to play with girls more, boys tend to play with boys. This is similar across all societies all over the world. Girls will focus on one or two best friends, BFFs, of equal status. Their conflicts solved within by compromising, or they'll ignore the situation or giving in. Some girls would just give in. Girls can be confrontational with boys or girls who are not their friends. Girls' language tends to be less confrontational in some cases, but today's girls are even more and more aggressive than boys are when it comes to verbal and relational aggression, especially as it pertains to online behaviors. Cross ethnic group friendships. Children make friends with children from the same race initially. Whites and African American children show a high degree of mutual acceptance of one another. And as we increase contact between perceived minority and majority groups, we can reduce prejudice and discrimination. Allowing children to get to know each other in their own environment without adult influence is often the best way to reduce prejudice and discriminatory behaviors between children. Let's review. Understanding of friendship changes from sharing enjoyable activities with those personal traits that meet their needs to a focus on intimacy and loyalty as middle childhood progresses. Friendship status does show some degree of hierarchy. Improvements in social problem solving and social information processing leads to popularity and better interpersonal skills. I'm not really fond of the idea of popularity, but we could say leads to children getting along better with more children. Looking at relationship building, again, generally friendships in middle childhood when they're younger are of the same sex. Boys tend to form groups of friends. Girls tend to have one or two closer friends as children age. Interethnic relationships decline. I don't wouldn't say that they decline, but more so that their friendships become centered around their personal activities and levels of trust. Family life in middle childhood. Social and personality development in childhood. We are going to look at some specifics in family life, which will include the types of families, what families look like today, multi-generational, single, blended, siblings, and all these things and their impact on development. During middle childhood, children are less controlled by their parents. This is when they begin to take control of their own schedules and subsequently their own behaviors. This co-regulation creates a sharing of control of the child's behavior by parent and the child. This can be a good thing as it gives the child a large degree of autonomy and builds decision-making skills. However, not all decisions may be the best, but the child will learn to live with the consequences of those decisions. The changes in family dynamics, whether the family's single, blended, grandparents, over the last several decades finds today's children increasingly more independent as parents work longer hours and in some cases multiple jobs. Siblings also influence development during middle childhood. However, during this phase, parents still remain a major influence over their children and in their children's lives. Siblings can provide companionship. Older siblings especially can act as a role model and partial caregiver, looking after younger siblings. Sibling rivalry is common but can be exacerbated when parents show favoritism toward one sibling over others. Once thought of as selfish and self-centered, only children actually, we understand they turn out to be as well adjusted as regular children. Studies out of China during the years that they had their one child rule revealed that only children tend to have higher academics, which is likely attributed to the fact that the parent can devote more time and resources to one child. Almost a quarter of U.S. children under the age of 18 live with one parent and no other adult, about 23%. More than 3 times the share of children around the world who do so. In comparison, 3% of children in China, 4% of children in Nigeria, and 5% of children in India live in a single parent household. In neighboring Canada, the share is only about 15%. Multi-generational family households have increased as well as a result of economic losses, young adults living with their parents as renting becomes more expensive, older parents moving in with their children to assist with childcare, and those that can afford it as they age will opt to invest in a home large enough for their children and family, as they will one day need care and would rather invest in a larger home to help with children and that the children can inherit rather than pay the fees for convalescent or nursing care when that time comes. It is prevalent among families of color, African Americans, Hispanics, to have multi-generational families as well, somewhat more so than among Caucasians. Living in blended families between divorced individuals and single parents recoupling, blended families are as common as couples join new relationships. 16% of children live in a blended household. This rate has remained steady across the U.S. Two incomes is always better than one. Blended families have a stronger financial state. That financial state improves. The relationship, of course, with the children will depend on communication and expectations of the family members. But school-age children of blended families usually fare well. Children raised by same-sex couples are as well adjusted as their peers raised by single parents and opposite-sex parents. The option to have a loving, caring couple of the same sex raising a child, to me, is always better than having that child languish in dependency foster care system, only to age out at age 18 and left to fend for themselves. Research supports that there is very little difference between a child raised in a heterosexual family and those raised by a same-sex couple. When it comes to the influence of culture and family life on middle childhood development, family connectedness is the common denominator across all ethnic groups of color. These are shared beliefs. Families have strong sense of community. Family is important. Religious or spiritual relationships are important. And oftentimes the needs of the family may come before the needs of the individual. Some challenges to families: children home alone, unlike the movie of the same title, have an opportunity to develop autonomy, independence, self-care skills, and time management. Divorce does impact development during middle childhood. The degree and the extent that a divorce has a negative impact on a child will depend on the behaviors of the parents during the process and the parenting skills both before and after the divorce. Although parents should not get their children involved in the details of the divorce, it is imperative that children are reassured the divorce has nothing to do with them and their love for their child remains intact despite the parental separation. It is more beneficial for a family to likely have a divorce than for a child to grow up in a home filled with conflict and animus where they do not see an example of a loving family unit, but they see strife and discontent between two adults. That will have probably a greater negative impact than the divorce. Children tend to recover from divorce rather quickly, or at least within 2 years, especially if it's amicable and the parents are able to come to agreements. Other challenges to family life during middle childhood is poverty. Families that struggle to make their ends meet daily face many economic hardships. It is not so much an unsafe neighborhood as it is affordable housing that is a concern, being able to earn a living wage and have access to affordable rent or the ability to purchase a home. Economic hardships are rooted in socio-political policies and practices that do not always work on the behalf of working and middle class families. The U.S. no longer, when it comes to children outside of homes, without homes, in neglected areas, the U.S. no longer has orphanages. We have a dependency system that includes contracted group homes and foster care, foster parent homes. Orphanages have been replaced by these group homes and residential treatment centers. Children whose parents can no longer care for them adequately, or where the level of neglect and abuse in the home has risen to the point where the child must be removed from the home, are placed in group homes. Mainly older children, middle and high school age children are placed in group homes. Group care has its advantages and disadvantages. However, I disagree with the textbook. The best case scenario is not the development of a bond with a group worker, although that is important. The best case scenario for children in foster care is family reunification before the child ages out at the age of 18. Though that may not always be the case, oftentimes children who are removed from homes, the family members, the parents, are suffering from issues of their own that can run the gamut between drug abuse, mental health, and just a lack of parenting and their own trauma that prevents them from being an adequate parent. This is where group care is beneficial and works on behalf of children if they can work with the families to get the families, as I stated, reunited at some point. Let's review family life in middle childhood. As noted, children may grow up in a traditional two-parent home, single-parent home, multi-generational, blended, or a family that is of same-sex parents. Either way, it is the parenting skills, it is the love, care, and the dedication that parents provide, the structured discipline from an authoritative perspective that makes that child's home life successful and helps them navigate successfully through this stage of development. The impact of non traditional households depends on economics, society's acceptance, and the absence or presence of tension in the adults. I would say society may or may not accept a parent, a family, their family unit. So, in those cases, especially if we're talking about same sex parents, we must raise our children, no matter what home they come from, to have self awareness, self acceptance, and self love, and not to concern themselves with the judgment of others. So, we first drop judgments against ourselves, and then we can no longer judge others. Because, as I stated, who are we to determine what someone's family is supposed to look like? As long as that child is cared for, provided for, they are safe and secure. When it comes to children that are home alone, self care children may have some loneliness but develop higher self esteem and independence over time. A child's response to divorce depends on the amount of conflict after divorce and possible financial changes after divorce, as well as parenting skills during and after the divorce. Economic challenges, of course, increases disruptions, and parents may have less time to spend with children if they have to focus on multiple jobs and to make payments to make their ends meet in order to put food on the table. Economic disadvantages can have an impact on a child and their development if they are living in lack. Children of poverty are at greater risk for academic performance and higher rates of aggression when that lack of income or that poverty also produces trauma and stress that impedes effective parenting. All children who live in economically challenged homes will not necessarily suffer academically or be aggressive because you don't have to have a lot of money to be a good parent. Question for the review. A child's response to divorce may include which of these? I will give you a minute. And if you picked increased anxiety, sleep disturbances, and depression, letter B, you are correct. Question. Politicians often speak of, quote, family values. How does this term relate to diverse family situations such as divorced parents, single parents, blended working parents, self-care children, and children in group care? The real question is how many of these politicians hold values of their own? Check the discussion section under Chapter 5 to see if in fact you have a discussion related to this question. And that will conclude Chapter 5. We will only be covering this module 5.3. Please make sure to review the slide content and the notes as it relates to this recorded presentation.